Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to Workshop, Oak Harbor City Council Workshop, Wednesday, April 27th. I'm Mayor Bob Severance, and I'd like to go around the table and introduce the folks at the table here. And we won't try to get everybody in the crowd today, but thank you all for coming and welcome.
I'm Mayor Begal, Mayor Pro Tem.
Jim Campbell, City Council.
Tara Heisen, City Council.
Beth Munn, City Council.
Doug Merriman, City Administrator.
Steve Powers, Development Services Director.
Erica Wassinger, City Council.
And Joel Servadius, City Council.
And we have one that just came back in the room.
Rick Alberg, City Council.
Well, thank you all. I want to start the meeting with employee recognitions. In today's meeting, we have a very special recognition and presentation. I'd like to start some things off and talk about Dr. Larry Edward Court. I participated in a celebration of his life late in 2015, and I'd like to talk about a few things about Larry and actually invite people here today if they'd like to say a few words. Those of you that were able to work with Larry. He was obviously a very honorable man and a treasured husband. Something special happened to Oak Harbor when he arrived 6 months old. He was born August 1, 1955, and when he arrived on North Whidbey at 6 months old, something very special happened to Oak Harbor. He played with his dog Freckles around Oak Harbor. He went to school in Oak Harbor and graduated from Oak Harbor High School in 1973. And then he left North Whidbey and went off to college. He graduated from the University of Washington in 1977 and became a cartographer at a time when cartography was an art form as much as a science. Some of the creative and artistic techniques he used in his map making were new and uniquely his. He earned a master's degree in historical geography. He also pursued and earned a PhD in cultural geography at the University College London. And it was not long after that something special actually happened to the town of Coupeville when he started working there as their town planner, and he was working under their brand new mayor, Nancy Connard, who most of you know spent a lot of years as a very distinguished mayor for the town of Coupeville. After leaving Coupeville, something special happened to Oak Harbor in 2003 when Larry came to work as a project specialist. He worked as a project specialist and ultimately became our city administrator for the city of Oak Harbor. He loved his Oak Harbor city staff. He helped bring calm, creativity, and stability to City Hall at a tumultuous time, and never strayed from his singular focus to serve the citizens of Oak Harbor. Today, we have, in recognition and sincere appreciation of Dr. Court's distinguished service, guidance, and devotion to the city of Oak Harbor, we have his oak leaf, Dr. Larry E. Court, 2003 to 2015. Thank you for the friendship you offered, the advice you gave, and the leadership and support you provided to the staff and our community. Your time here will be well remembered by everyone. Cheers. That was Larry. It is my honor to present this to Elizabeth Court, his wonderful wife, and to his mother, Dorothy Court.
Yay.
Dorothy is here with us today, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, thank you. And I have to just say real quick, thank you so much. And I mean, there are a lot of city staff here. He just so loved the city staff and felt so honored actually to work with you all. And I have to say, I've had 3 or 4 city staff say that when they kind of get in a pinch or trying to make a decision about something, they sit there and say, now what would Larry do?
What would Larry do?
Which
Yeah.
is, a great honor, and it's a wonderful sentiment. He would love that. But, the reality is what Larry would do is actually say what's best for the citizens of Oak Harbor. And so I think, maybe going forward, instead of wringing your hands and figuring out what Larry would do, trying to figure that out, just say what's best for the citizens of Oak Harbor, and you all are going to continue doing the great job you're doing. So thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
So, do we have anybody that would like to say a few words at this time? Mr. Allenberg.
Thank you. Larry and I had the pleasure to work for over 20 years in other jurisdictions, Langley, Coopville, here. And one of the themes that I will always remember Larry on the public side versus the private side is, Rick, you can't quite do it that way, but this is how you can do it. He was, I can help you through the regulation to get something accomplished. He didn't instantly go to no, as often people on the private side seem to interpret city decisions. We also shared a love of travel in Europe, and particularly in France. And we always had this planned. We were going to meet up in Paris, and we were going to have that glass of wine on one of the cafe streets with Elizabeth and Laura and myself and Larry. And when I would come back from some of the trips, I was so excited to speak French in my form to him, and he would always smile. And I'm not sure he understood what I was saying. And then he would kind of repeat it in real French language, and I couldn't quite understand it. So we did share that moment many times. The one regret that I have is we never shared the glass of wine on the streets of Paris. Thank you. But we will with you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you. Larry and I shared a love and a desire to go back to England and Scotland once in a while since we both lived there. But this might sound a little weird. The best compliment that I can give to Larry Court is he was a consummate gentleman, always. That's just the way he approached everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Campbell. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Merriman.
I had jotted down some different thoughts in that, but it's not worth just going through and trying to read all of this. But, the last couple of years especially, got to spend a lot of time with Larry. And one time even over in Leavenworth with Elizabeth and Larry and my wife and I, and talking about the city and that. And one thing that I was always impressed with Larry always was talking about what's good for the community and that, and always kept it in a lighthearted way too. It was something that was a pleasure to do. It wasn't an obligation to do. And that was always really impressive to me with him. Larry really valued people, and he valued all of us. There are times sitting at their house, talking with Elizabeth and Larry. Larry he would go down everybody that he worked with at the city and ask, how are they doing? How are they doing? And you could tell it was just really important to him. And I think it goes both ways too. I run into people at the store and we talk about Larry and that, and usually there are two things people always mention. The first is, like we've all said, his love of community and love of people. And the second one, people are always saying, his hair, that curly hair. I think Larry sometimes was renowned more for that than maybe some of the things he worked with at the city. So I was really happy today to see that we give Larry a little bit of our traditional type congratulations for his retirement, and especially to have Elizabeth and Dorothy here today. That's really a great thing. I think Larry was and is a really good friend to all of us, and if he were here, I would say congratulations, Larry. You are missed.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you once again. Yes. Sure. Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, we're still on item number 1, and we'll move now to the new employee introductions. Do we have some new employee introductions at this time?
Start. This is Robert Bailey. He recently started in our Parks Department.
Great.
Welcome him.
Welcome aboard, Robert. Employee
Oh,
recognition.
there you are. And saying, oh my gosh, she's missing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to introduce to everybody Patricia Sull, our long-awaited finance director, who's down here from Alaska, has quite a background in finance, including municipal finance, and I am so glad she's here. So just welcome.
Welcome, Patricia. Okay, any other new employee recognitions? Okay. On to agenda item number 2, department briefings. Windjammer Park Integration Plan Update, Development Services.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that, Jim. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This will be a quick item for you. It's really a follow-up to the update that Joe Stowell gave you at your last council meeting a week ago Tuesday. It's intended just to quickly go over that same material, see if you have any comments or questions that have come to mind since last week. Also maybe give you a chance to share any thoughts that you've heard from the public, and then also frankly to give another opportunity for this to be on the television so the public can stay informed as to what we're doing. Let's see. Jim, I'm experiencing some challenges here.
Me too. Steve, you better not have broken my clicker.
Yeah, I broke Joe's PowerPoint. He's really going to be annoyed with me. Can you manually go to the next slide?
It seems new.
So imagine, if you will, that I have a little Rod Serling for you all. So really, what we really want to do is just to remind the council and remind the community that we've been engaged in what we think is a fairly intensive public process, utilizing the Community Advisory Group, or CAG as we've been referring to them, to help you and to help the community figure out what are the right elements and the right combination to go back into Windjammer Park when we're done with the construction of the clean water facility. I think you all know that that's the real goal behind this particular planning project. We set out with a rather aggressive schedule in terms of a public process. We set out with the idea we were going to have 5 meetings with our community advisory group. We've had 4 of those so far. 2 of those have been combined meetings with the CAG and then open houses in which the public was invited to attend and participate and observe the meeting and then interact with the CAG as well as staff and the consultant team and provide feedback on the designs and the concepts. And the very last one of those, in fact, took place on March 29th. It was the first hour was that CAG meeting. The second hour was the open house. Some of you had an opportunity to attend that. And that's where we talked to the CAG as well as to the community about what had begun to emerge as the draft preferred alternative. And it was a combination of the 3 alternatives that had previously been the result of the input from you as well as the rest of the community. And we are marching our way towards what, on our schedule at least, is our last meeting with the CAG, which will be next Thursday evening. It's just a CAG meeting. Obviously, it's open to the public for individuals to observe, but we're not doing it as another open house. And our goal for that particular meeting is to review the feedback that we've received from the community, both at that open house in-person open house and then the online open house. And I think Joe shared some of those high-level comments with you on Tuesday evening when the PowerPoint apparently worked. And so that's really where we are with the project. Where we think the schedule's going from here on out is that last meeting on May 5th. What we hope to do is have the CAG feel comfortable in sending forward what they consider to be the draft preferred plan. We will then brief the Planning Commission and the Park Board one more time, which is what we've been doing all along. We intend to brief you at your May 25th workshop, and then on tap for a June 7th date for you to first time formally consider that Windjammer Park integration plan. If you're comfortable with it at that time, we would have a resolution that would allow for the adoption of the plan. What does that mean to us after that? Well, what that's really doing, as you might recall, is not only helping us to set the community's vision for Windjammer Park, but in terms of the clean water facility, most importantly, it's going to help us identify those things that we need to do as we get to the point where we're finishing that project and it's time for us to repair figuratively and literally those things which have taken place in the park as a result of the construction. And so there's a very practical purpose in this as well, which is to help get us that short list of things that we need to turn over to our design team, our consultant team, and our engineers to start getting into the construction document process. So that's really kind of a quick thumbnail sketch of where we are. Covered all the things that I think I wanted to cover. Oh, thanks, Jim. So, we've gone through, I think I've hit most of these things. What I maybe didn't quite touch on is that so far, what we're getting back in terms of the CAG is positive feedback on the process. That's that third bullet point up there. They recognize that there are a lot of different community values that all come together. Nobody is going to like every single aspect of every single thing, but as a group, they have worked extraordinarily well together in developing consensus when consensus is appropriate. And that's really that fourth bullet point, is they seem to be very satisfied with where we are so far. This is what I was summarizing before. This is the draft concept that was further explained at the March 29th meeting. What I did not mention was that online open house. The dates for that were March 30th through April 8th, so a couple of weeks worth of input. We had a number of unique visitors to that site. We've received back 49 in-person and online feedback forms. I think the vast majority of those were online, so that's encouraging, which means that we got a lot of good feedback from people who participated in the online open house. Things which we've learned from the plan. Here's a surprise: everybody seems to be interested in the splash park. We've been talking about that time and time and time again. I think that's universally supported. There maybe is some thought from some members of the community that there's too much going on in the park design. And so I know we're taking a good close look at that to make sure that we're trying to be sensitive to having the appropriate number of program elements, but also leave that open space that is so dearly enjoyed and appreciated by the community. There are some varying opinions about the configuration of the waterfront trail. If you were at the open house, I think you heard some of those comments. As conceptually designed, it's been made a little bit curvilinear, some meandering, also introducing some topography to it. We've had some feedback that that's good. We've had some feedback that that's not what people like, that they prefer the straight pathway along the edge of the waterfront. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to handle that. Generally, most folks who commented were not particularly interested in the new vehicular access to the park coming from Bayshore Drive near the waterside condominiums. We're looking at how do we access that parking without that particular driveway connection. And the CAG generally seems to support the idea of removing or relocating the RV park and the baseball fields if other locations can be found. Public opinion is more varied than that. And an obvious consensus that the waterfront is a resource and an asset to us. I won't go over this schedule for you. We've shared this with you on several occasions. The red check marks really show you that we're fairly far along in this process. And what this does is give you the details of the high-level schedule I just gave to you. May 5th, May 25th for you folks, June 7th if we stay on schedule. There are those dates right there. And I think the next one was the question slide. So thank you, Jim, for bringing that up. Or is there anything that I can help the council with?
Any questions? Inputs? Yes,
Sorry.
Councilman.
Next Thursday, the CAG meeting, can you tell us when and where?
It is 5:30 to 7:30 at Whidbey Island Bank. I don't remember if we've done a notice of attendance, but if we haven't, we can, so that the council could observe.
So that's our building?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the former Whidbey Island Bank building.
Right, okay.
Which also serves as the project offices. Yeah.
So if we'll just let Anna know if we plan to go.
We'll make sure that we'll do a notice of
Yeah,
attendance.
we'll just notice.
Yeah. That way, if you have 4 of you or more show up to observe, that we won't have a quorum problem.
Thank you.
Councilor Campbell?
Thank you. In your public comment on the RV park, did anybody go down and ask the people that are staying in the RV park how they feel about it? Because that's going to be terribly different than what the citizens think, I think.
We did not, to the best of my knowledge, do an outreach effort directly to those folks, Mr. Campbell, to anybody who may have been currently staying in there. The feedback that we've gotten from the community, if I understand correctly, has been mixed. That there are a number who think that it's a facility that we should keep, and that it has a purpose, and that it's an asset in the waterfront park. And there are some comments from the public who say essentially it's a facility that we don't need at that location.
I think if someone went down there and took a poll, if the question was, is it better here or somewhere else, what the people that stay there would say is it's better there because if it's close to everything.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Other council questions, input? Okay,
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bowers, and it looks like, are you up on item number 2B, 2016 comprehensive plan?
Mr. Kamak will do that, but I'll sit here.
Welcome, Mr. Kamak.
Moral support.
So 2016 comprehensive plan, we're getting to the very kind of the home stretch of trying to get this adopted. We started this about 3 years ago and been hacking at it slowly, and the Planning Commission has done a lot of great work in discussing the various elements, and so things are moving along. As I'm talking, I'm going to take one and pass around. These are 2 different elements coming your way. So as they come along, I'll just kind of provide an update. So we are hoping to be on schedule. The deadline for adoption of the 2016 comprehensive plan is June 30th. And we are hoping to have a couple hearings in front of the Planning Commission in May and a couple hearings in front of the City Council in June. So we're hoping that we can adopt the comprehensive plan at I think the June 15th workshop. We're going to try and advertise that as a special meeting so that the council can take action on the comprehensive plan. So we are hoping to be on schedule. One of the things that was concerning for us was how the county's schedule, since they, and I'm sure the council is aware, was in the paper that they are going to delay their adoption process. They're hoping to do their adoption by October. And so they have requested the state provide an extension for them. And we were concerned that some of their decisions may impact our schedule as well, because one of the things that they were contemplating doing is to allocate more population to urban areas in the North Whidbey area. They have a long-standing policy of trying to shift more growth towards the urban areas because they do grow more than kind of GMA acceptable standards in the rural area. And that shift would have had us rethinking our urban growth areas and our capacity. But they have decided to delay that decision and consider it along with some other comprehensive plan elements that they're doing later on. And so that decision is not being taken, so we can go ahead and get ours adopted. And when they do approach that situation, then we'll just tackle that as an annual amendment to a comprehensive plan. So we should be okay in terms of our schedule moving forward. So what we have distributed to you is kind of the last few elements that we're looking at in updating the comprehensive plan, and the draft transportation plan is also in front of you. So just a few notes on these two elements. The utilities element and the government services element are elements in our comprehensive plan that are not necessarily GMA required. We have 12 or 13 elements in our comprehensive plan, and only about 6 or 7 of them are actually required by law for us to have. The others are something that we have chosen as a community to have. So these are, what we're doing is just updating the statistics on it, kind of bringing it up to kind of current standards, clarifying some intent statements in the goals and policies. We're not doing any major shifts in policies. So most of the corrections the versions that you have has a clean copy and an edited copy, so you can see what we actually are changing. The highlighted sections in both of them are still work in progress. Some of these sections, we need input from other agencies, like schools have highlighted. We're still waiting for some updates from them. Library, the college, we're still waiting for some information from them. We'd like to get information from them to put it in our comprehensive plan. So we're hoping to get that in the next couple of weeks. I've just highlighted that mainly as something, as a reminder for us, but also to let you know that those are still things that are still work in progress. The transportation plan, this is the draft. We're looking at the draft currently as well, just to make sure that we are, that everything is lining up. And so there are sections in it that are still being worked on. What we'll do with that, from this draft transportation plan, we'll extract certain elements to put it in the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. We don't need this entire plan to be in our comprehensive plan. It has a lot of technical information, non-policy type information. We don't need that in the comp plan, because any changes to those would require a comp plan amendment. So what we want to do is just kind of take out the goals and policies, functional classifications, and some other basic policy type information from the plan and put it in the element. And so we're kind of working through all of that. We're hoping to have a draft comprehensive plan for the Planning Commission in May. And once we have that draft, we'll be happy to share it with you. I'm guessing we'll come to you at the May workshop and we'll give you a draft copy of the comprehensive plan so that you can all start looking at it. So go through it. If you have any comments, feel free to scribble on it and drop it off at downstairs or in my office. If you have any questions, please give me a call and we'll chat about it. But we're just kind of getting this information out so that we can have you start looking at it, and if you have any concerns, you can contact us. So I think I've covered most of what I wanted to say. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, Councilor Omberg.
Thank you, Mayor. At our meeting with the meeting that the mayor held with the school district and the Navy, and Mr. Powers was there, you used a number, I believe about 28,000 is the future number in
36.
36.
Yeah.
But when I just flipped this open, and I know you said this is a work in progress on future demand for power, there's a print in here that says by 2010, PSC is looking at 33,006, and we're looking at 25. There's a typo in this thing?
The entire yellow section is going to be replaced. I'm still waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, the highlighted sections
Okay.
are still under work. I've sent this language out to PSC, and they're working on it they're working with communities to provide language for
Because the
regionally.
2010 doesn't make sense in that.
Yeah, this entire thing will be gone.
Okay,
I just
then
wanted
the
to
other
know that.
question I have for you is, it wasn't clear to me whether it was the city's strategy to increase our UGA during this period of time of when we're anticipating the major growth from the Navy. Tell me what the strategy is right now from a planning perspective. Are we going to increase our UGA?
No. with the buildable land's capacity of the analysis indicates that there is sufficient land inside of the existing urban growth area to accommodate that growth. So we don't have a case to make that would say that the UGA should get bigger.
Thank you.
Did I understand you that everything in yellow goes away?
It probably will go away and
Okay.
get updated, yes.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Campbell.
I can remember several years ago, I think it was when Mayor Patty was the mayor of the town, that 30,000 or better number in 2035 was the number that you guys pitched to us. Why the difference between the 35,000 7 years ago and 28,000 now?
I'll take it, or do you want to?
Yeah, I can. So the growth and the trends were different when the last time the population projection was done back in 2003, 2004, I think. And at that time, there was a higher rate of increase for Oak Harbor and Whidbey Island. And the tendency at that time was to think of a straight line projection. So if there was an increase, they just drew the line to increase. And so the number was more than...
It was easier to draw the line.
It was easier to draw the line, and so at that time the trend was looking that way, that we were going to keep increasing in population. With the census, the 2010 census and the recession, we know that we didn't actually hit any of the increased rates that they were predicting, and so this time around we used a different process. It wasn't a straight line method. The Island County actually did the process for us, and the process is outlined in the countywide planning policies, but we worked with them a lot on that. And they looked at a lot of different things, like commuting, they looked at school population, they looked at the demographics of South, Middle, and North Whidbey, did different allocations for the different regions, and adjusted the numbers. So that's why the difference in what was done 10 years ago and what's done now.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
I just wanted to add for any viewers that may be watching on Channel 10 that this draft plan is online under our webpage, oakharbor.org, under the current projects section of that homepage, so that those folks can view it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Agenda 3A. Pending agenda items, Carollo Engineers. And it looks like we have our city engineer, Mr. Stoll, approaching. And you can introduce Mr. Mattson, if you will.
Mayor, council members, thank you for having me here. I brought my muscle with me here, Brian Mattson, to help answer any questions that I can't manage. And I got a PowerPoint for you. The subject of this item is Carollo Engineers Contract Amendment Number 14, which is for engineering services during construction. As well, I should have gone to the next slide. We've broken the amendment up into two parts. During the design phase, we had a management reserve that we didn't fully utilize. So the first part is exhausting that management reserve to complete some design items, and I'll get into those in a minute. And then the second part is engineering services during construction. We've already done a small part of that to start with the first phases of construction, and now we're going to push it out to the end of the project and have a contract for that. So this is just kind of a brief history of the amendments, and you'll have to forgive me, this is one of my more wordy slideshows that I usually like doing just bullet points, but it was too hard for me to paraphrase a lot of them. So amendments 1 through 5, well, there was the original contract with Carollo that got us started on the facilities plan effort, and amendments 1 through 5 got us through the rest of the facilities plan effort, all the siting, SEPA documents, management reserves that were in that were used to do some additional geotech report when we had the site selection somewhat narrowed down, and to include some public process. And so that kind of summarizes what was facilities plan, and allowed us to kind of put that aside and move forward into design. So amendments 6 through 9 got us through preliminary design. 30% is what that really means, and final design of the outfall. We had them running on separate tracks, so the outfall got way ahead of the rest of the design because we had a separate consultant helping us with that, a sub to Corollo. Amendment 10 brought us through final design, and it included a management reserve, which has gone unused. And then Amendment 11 was engineering services during construction for the outfall. So we've already done one of these contracts or something similar before. It was much smaller scale, not as complicated, but essential to things. And then Amendment 12 was kind of a cleanup, really. It was value engineering, additional geotech, separating out the GMP bid packages because we had changed the way we were delivering the project. Instead of having one or two or three bid packages, where we just had our 7th not too long ago. So there's a cost associated with putting those different packages together. And then for the early site preparation packages, they provided engineering services during construction and support on the Windjammer Park improvement plan. That was all in that amendment. It was a pretty healthy one. Amendment 13 stands largely on its own. That's at 30%, we were considering having the contractor provide the system integration and SCADA. When we moved forward to 60%, we had a change of mind and decided that it might be better to have our engineering consultant do that work. And that Amendment 13 assigns that work to Corollo to prepare. And I went through all that explanation sometime back. I won't go too far into the weeds on it. So Amendment 14, like I said, has two parts. It's completing the design efforts and engineering services during construction through the end of the project. To dig into more detail on the first part, so what are we using the management reserve for? Well, there were several things that we've kind of changed and elements that have changed that are good reason to use the management reserve. One was evaluating a larger second story on the meeting room, including meetings, alternate floor renderings, floor plans, and support costs. So that was, the numbers on there, $22,820. Redesigning the lab and admin building to a single story. So when we decided to remove the second story and reconfigure the first floor, and that's the amount to do that. LEED Silver certification is a requirement of our grant that we got through the governor's capital projects. And that, compared to the $2.5 million grant that we got, we already were implementing a large number of the LEED concepts in our design. This takes it the next step to actually get the certification. So there was, once we got the final floor, the final layout of the yard, there was some screening that needed to be adjusted, and that's what the $16,500 is for. Redesigning the north edge of the clean water facility. That's when we moved the odor control facilities outside the box and onto what was the Wells Fargo property. So those are efforts associated with presenting that. And in order to stay within the management reserve, Corollo's reduced their subcontractor markup to stay within that 218. So that's the first part of the amendment, which will be one action when it comes to council next time. If you look at the total design budget of the clean water facility and outfall, you got to remember that Corollo enlists a host of subcontractors to help them with this. The architect, MWA, geoengineers, ESA helped us with our permitting and environmental work. Webster Environmental is the one who does the odor control, and Greenworks is largely responsible for the pretty pictures we see in the Windjammer Park integration plan with Jeff's help. So the total of all that's $7.26 million, and that's within 6.5% to 8.5% of the construction costs. So that's usually how we gauge if we're in the ballpark, and which falls within the industry standards. And the industry standards we scoured through its other projects, its Office of Financial Management with the state. There's a publication that I presented back in 2013 that's California puts together for major projects, what to expect for
percentage of construction cost for design and services during construction. So we compared it against that and felt that it was within the reason. Just to show you that we've been staying on track, and here we are, we're nearing the end of design and things are going well. So part 2, amendments 11 and 12 had elements of engineering services during construction. So amendment 11 included some funding for the outfall services during construction, and amendment 12 got us started on the early site preparation through the deep excavation. If you remember when we first started bringing these consultant contracts for construction forward, we were kind of trying to pair them up with GMPs, and suddenly the GMPs started overlapping and complicating the heck out of things. I think we're at a point now where we're committed enough that we can commit to our consultants through the end of the project to be a part of this and help us through. So for part 2, and this is the services during construction, it assumes that there's a 30-month construction effort that would get them through October of 2018. So it spans quite a length of time. Ongoing project management of Corollo and their sub-consultants through the duration of the project with monthly progress reports and invoicing. This is stuff that you'd expect, but it's part of what you get with Amendment 14. Full-time on-site resident engineer. This is, right now, we currently have Mike Barrero on site once a week, and he's our first line of defense with Corollo. He is on, we're intending to ramp that up as construction ramps up to him being out there full-time. That's been the plan all along. He's on site for immediate support. Any questions that come up, he's the first guy to get it. He's going to attend the weekly meetings. He's going to be, if any RFIs, design clarifications, shop drawings or other submittals are going to go through him. If things go well, he'll be able to handle at least a third of those before disseminating those out to other Corollo engineers. Some of those he won't, they're just too specialized for him to answer. So he'll be able to promptly direct those to the right person for review. And like I say, he's effectively he's the clearinghouse for Corollo on site. There's a lot of efficiencies in that. And a super sharp guy, by the way. He's great to have on the project. So there's supplemental on-site field services. So the structural, mechanical, and electrical engineers of record will be making periodic visits to ensure that the project's getting built the way they intended it to be through their design. That's important because at the end of the day, Corollo has to put their name on it and say it was built the way we said it would be and it's operating right. There's some factory acceptance and witness testing that needs to occur. There's some equipment that you want to make sure it's working before it shows up on site. That's what that's regarding. And then it's understated here, but startup commissioning and staff training. And there's roughly 3 months of that effort in addition to the training that occurs before that. And we have Ron Kohler, who came from Brightwater, he retired from there, is now working for Corollo, and he's got this down. He comes in and he's able to. We've already been working on every piece of equipment that's in the plant, by every single piece of equipment, how much time it's going to take to service and how often, and digested that into how many man hours do we need on staff to be able to maintain this plant. So we're already pursuing this. This is going to take it the next steps because we got to be able to take this complex machine and operate it.
Could you tell the public what Brightwater is and the size of that, approximate size of that?
Why don't you help me with that one? Do you remember? It's huge.
Yeah, the capacity. I'm going to venture a guess that it's in the mid-20 range. It's a membrane bioreactor facility that King County owns and operates, and Ron Kohler was in charge of startup of that facility when he worked for King County.
That was about a $3+ billion.
Yeah, the numbers are hard to get your arms around because there were so many different components of that. There was a lot of conveyance, and the treatment plant itself was, I think, in the in the $1 billion range for liquids and solids in the pump station and such.
So that, I guess to put that in reference, that's 20, we're 2, up to 6. So, I mean, and then when you talk about the magnitude of the manpower that he managed during startup, he's the right guy for the job. Super nice to work with, and he gets it, and he communicates well with our operators as well. So, office services during construction. This is a little bit more in depth about what Mike Barrero, our resident engineer, will be fielding and hopefully handling a third of, if not dishing out to others. We expect about 800. Our assumptions are that we'll see 850 requests for information throughout the life of the project. And each one of those could take, an hour to 6 hours to resolve, or even longer to come to a solution on, to provide the contractor the information they need to move forward. Every one of the parts that shows up on site has or processes or ways of constructing something typically involves some form of a submittal from the contractor or subcontractor. So in the specification, it calls out a pump, and it has a set requirements, not only in what it can, how much it can pump, what materials it's made out of, how it bolts down, where the in and out is, the electrical controls for it. Every single pump has a whole number of these that have to meet the specification by the engineer. And that's what the submittal does. They submit, this is the pump that we'd like to use, and you have to drill down in and make sure, yep, they use the stainless steel part. That's what we asked for, that's what the bid was for, and that's what we're getting. So you imagine 800 of those, and the effort that goes into doing that. And then I shouldn't say quite often, but often enough, the submittals either need further clarification, or they didn't quite get it the way we intended it, and they have to resubmit. So 800 total submittals and 200 additional resubmittals at an average of about 2.5 hours per review is what the assumption is in the proposal. And then as you move forward, there's 100 design clarification packages at an average of 20 hours each. And those are where we actually go through and make design changes that come up and require a bit more effort. And those come about potentially through field issues that come up that you just were unforeseen, and we got to make changes. So this, that's the next line there. So the other big thing is preparing an electronic O&M documentation, and I listed it's below. It's an internet-based library that shows all the vendor information, standard operating procedures, training materials. You can include photos or videos or training videos, drawings of shop drawings for that particular part. It's the library you go to when you either want to do something or have to do something on the plant. That's the go-to. And if you were to print all that out, it probably stretch the length of the table here.
It never get looked at.
Right.
Nobody wants to go into a tome of 3-ring binders, but electronic-based is definitely more accessible.
What we're hoping to do is tie this with the SCADA, with everything else, so that it's easier for our operators to maneuver between the different things. And then at the end of the day, we have to produce, in order to stay in compliance with our permit and our SRF loans, record drawings for the project. And there's, we've assumed 600 plan sheets at about 3.5 hours a plan sheet. So you can see those are the assumptions that we've made, or Corollo's made, to put together their cost estimate for us. If things go well, I'm hoping that number comes in lower, but we had to start with something, and we're looking 1.5 years out. So a part of Amendment 14 is continuing our public support process. If I suppose by this point, every one of you has met Erin. So Erin with Enviro Issues, her company, or the company she works with, helps us with the regular email updates and posters and events and public outreach. And to be honest, when this thing first started, I don't think I realized how great an asset it is to have them on the job helping with things. They really do help us out a lot. Sub-consultant support, so this includes architect, landscape architect, non-process building, and subs commensurate with the location of the facility. You want to expand on that one a little bit?
Yeah, so Jeff McGraw from MW Architects has a group that he works with, the landscape architects as well as mechanical, electrical, and plumbing designers that specialize in more commercial types of buildings, publicly accessible spaces, office spaces, things like that. The non-process structures like lab, admin, and maintenance facility. So those are the folks that are that work with Jeff, to have synergy working with Jeff to deliver the the look and feel of the plant from the outside as well as the inside of those supporting structures.
So the other thing that we've included in here is because it does span multiple years and escalation cost in there for their fees. So the breakdown, and this is why all the lead up is it's not necessarily inexpensive, but it's essential to having a successful project. So you can see that Corollo is roughly 4.4 million. And you run down the list, and we end up with a total estimated effort, and this is for part 2, $5.3 million worth of engineering services during construction. And keep in mind the O&M manuals quite often aren't included in that, and there's some, the Enviro issues might not be normally included in a project. But that's kind of the nutshell of what we'll be coming to you with at the next council meeting. If you look at amendments, how this compares to other projects, it's approximately 5.5% to 7.5% of the construction cost. If you do design and construction services, it's roughly 12.6 million, which is about 12 to 16% of the construction cost. And I compared that against the same metrics I did, but with the other one, and it checks out that it's within reason. Keep in mind we've dropped the facilities plan off of this because that was more of a planning part of it, but just want to make note of that. So I left this slide till last because I went through a lot of the what's in there. Now I thought I was debating whether to put the why at the front or the end. So I added a why are we doing this slide. I mentioned it earlier. Well, our funding requires that we have an engineer of record for the drawings, and who better to do that than the engineer who designed it. So we've done our best to estimate based on past experience and what we know about the project to come up with a man-hour and a dollar amount budget. We're going to need support when we start up the new plant. Our guys need training. We need to have Corollo involved during that startup to have a successful project. Designs are much like a book. You can interpret them a bunch of different ways. And I've run into that on my own designs, and we want this thing built the way that Corollo intended it to be built, because it's a biological machine, and it needs to operate properly. And since they're putting their stamp on it at the end of the day that says, yep, it's working the way we intended it to, having them on site to ensure the project's constructed as intended is essential. And that's the end of if you have any questions.
Councilor Mons.
Thank you. So these estimated effect, where is our cost with this projected cost? Have we figured this in already, or this is in addition to? we didn't figure this in?
It's been thought of, and it has had to be a part of it since the very beginning. And matter of fact, when we came forward at one of the previous council meetings, I think there was a conversation with Allenberg asking, is this going to be it? And we, Brian sheepishly got up there and said, no, it's going to be 4 or 5 million more for engineering services during construction. So this is not a new topic. It's part of what we've intended to have along.
So in our planning with our SRF loans and the bond we just sold, are these costs within that we have money to cover this, or are we going to have to try to get another SRF loan to wrap this up? Is kind of what I'm wanting to know.
They're in the total projection at
Okay.
this time. It doesn't mean that later on, as we get towards the end, we won't go for SRF loans again.
Okay.
Just that there are other items that come up, so we could still do that. But these are in that cost projections. That we
Okay.
have this time.
Thank you.
Similar, probably dovetailing off Councilmember Munn. So you say 12 to 16%, 12.56. That gives us a total of 12%, 104, 16%. We had this backwards, 78 million to 104. Is that still realistic?
I purposefully didn't put the total construction costs in there because, quite honestly, we're actively working on the 90% for the process buildings right now. And it's in our schedule to come back to you later this summer with an updated cost estimate, as well as the next step would be actually to bid it and get a GMP for the real price for it.
So we say it's included, but then maybe I misread the early slide. You said it's within industry spec because it started out at 6.5 to 8.5, and then with the new number it went from that to 12 to 16%. But
Two different metrics.
Okay.
One was for design, and the other one was for engineering services during construction. And then I combined the two, engineering design and engineering services during construction combined.
Okay.
So I looked at it all three ways.
And I might add into that too, keep in mind, that's a percentage of hard construction costs. There will be other construction costs, we've called them soft costs, that'll be in addition to that. So I don't want there to be an expectation we're going to be at $78 million or to 102. That range is probably a little bit higher than that. I want to make sure when we're talking about these things that we're talking about construction costs there. We'll have other costs in addition to that.
This is a soft cost that we're talking about, if that makes any sense, and hard costs are actual construction.
I have a question. When we had our couple of meetings ago, when you presented to me a big spreadsheet, these costs are in those numbers.
They are.
Okay.
I think the initial one, this is something that we haven't had a chance to share just yet, but we will this summer. But there was a plug number in there in the draft version that you saw.
How does this number compare to the number?
It's different. It's a little bit higher, but the numbers, like I say, we were working off a draft Brett had put together that just plugged a number in that was to make sure we didn't forget to look at it closer.
Councilman Arm.
Thank you, Mayor. Slides 1 through 5, you have a number of, you could go to the very beginning. You have some definitions, let's see, starting right there. There is a process of going through facilities planning, siting, SEPA, etc. When you present this package to the council, would you please break out those costs that are not part of the technical engineering side of this? It's community outreach, it's the stuff that we have to do in public work, but also they are things that the council assigned the staff to follow up on. We went through this process of site selection. And we got down to 3 sites, and then we got down to 2 sites, and then we got down to 1 site, and then we had another go at, let's reconsider this site, and we did kind of the same thing with the building. We went from a plant to 2 stories to a community room, and then we drop off. Those are things that are not related to the actual hardcore engineering process. It's difficult for me to relate to percentages when I don't know how you arrived at percentages, and it's difficult for me to understand total cost when there's all of this other work that's kind of meshed in with it. So, I would like to know, and I think the council should know, what are those preliminary costs that were incurred as we go tripping through this process of site selection, community room selection, and we set that aside so that we are looking at strictly construction-related engineering. And then I would also like to know, when you're throwing in your summary about percentages, I want to know how you arrived at those percentages, what numbers, what categories of numbers that you used, and the number that you used to represent things that are 6.5%, 12.5%, 16%. I don't know how you arrived at that. I don't know what it means. And I don't know what it means relative to how you arrive at 5.3 million, and then these things are into it. And that's what our workshop is for, is to shake these types of things out. Those are the questions, that's the information I need.
I can help with a little bit of that out of the gate. At the, since Amendment 6 or 7, I can't remember which one it was, but at the back of each one of the agenda bills for Carollo, there's been a summary of all their previous contracts. And we've broken it out as to whether it was facilities plan, preliminary engineering, final engineering, SCADA, and now there'll be a column in there for engineering services during construction. And that'll be, it's already uploaded to Agendas and it'll be part of the next packet.
Okay.
So that's the 10,000 foot level of how did we break it up by category. As far as getting into the nuts and bolts of how much extra did we spend deciding which site to go with when, Crescent Harbor North was added, or we explored Carl Friend's property, the additional geotech that goes along with looking into that, and site selection, it just in Windjammer Park, and adding up the different costs that associated with whether we went with 200 seat community room, 145, yes, no, architecture, A or B. That's going to take some effort to pull all that information together, but we can do that for you. But it's not a small challenge to extract all that out of invoices. If that's what you want, I can work with the team and see if we can figure out a way to do it.
I think it's important, well, it's certainly important for me, or I wouldn't ask the question, but I also think, I know it's important to the public. Because when they ask questions about how come this is costing so much, starting with the plant, how come engineering is so expensive, how come construction is so expensive, we have to have an educated mental library of how this stuff fits into a few words to express to the public. So we're asking you to do the hard work so that we can do the little bits to explain. It does cost money to go out there and drill like we did on Carl Friend's property. It costs money to go out there and mess around on that property and look at the elevations, the topo and the flood and all that kind of stuff. All these things add up. Now, am I asking you to do it am I asking you to spend $10 to do, to forget $1 worth of information? I don't think it's $1 worth of information. I think we should understand why we are in the 12 to 16% cost for engineering, and not just because you say that's market, because that is not my experience on public projects. But I know there's a lot of other things to that that probably kick that up into that area.
I appreciate that, and I'll have to talk with Doug and the mayor about how to get you the answer you're looking for.
Okay?
I think we can, if we talked in generalities and assumptions, we could give you a good guesstimate of what each one of these things cost us. If we wanted to get down into the details, I think we might make Chris Bailey pull her hair out.
I'm not asking anybody to do an audit. I think some of these numbers are big enough to be able to represent an approximate of what the geotech, the extra geotech costs, what it costs for each of these. Each time we backtracked and took another look at this, backtracked, did another look at that item. All of that backtracking, you know, it's 200,000 here, it's 150 there, you know, it keeps adding up.
That's on, it was when we first started this project, that was one of my biggest fears, is the ability to give our consultants in engineering, our consultants and our construction team the information they needed in a timely fashion, because time is money, and if we keep things moving, the train moving in a good fashion, it helps with reduce the cost. And there's things that come up that you know that require us to take a pause and look and make sure if it's the right thing to do or not. And I don't know if measuring that, this is just my personal opinion, maybe I shouldn't share it, but I don't know if measuring that at this point is going to change the outcome.
I agree, it probably won't change the outcome. It allows us, at least it allows me to make a decision when we want to do a $5.3 million addition to a contract. What does that mean in the overall contract? And what is in that contract that we did that is not really ultimate engineering, but all of this other periphery stuff that we have done based on our request and public request and politics and all this kind of stuff.
The other thing that we'll be sharing, and we haven't with since Nikki made me do it, you know, since she's not here, I can blame her. But with every one of the contract amendments, we include all the previous amendments.
Right.
And so that's why when we come forward with an amendment to Carollo or Hoffman's contracts, they're 400 or 500 pages easy. So all of the previous agreements and what we've asked and what's been in the scope will be there, but we can also work to digest that down, and I'll work with Doug and we'll sort it out.
Mm-hmm. So I recognize this means man hours to do this. And I recognize every time we drop back and look at something to ask Carollo to go off in a different direction, that costs money also. But when I look at 12.5 and 16, just because you say so is not good enough for me. That doesn't mean I don't trust you. It means I don't understand what you did to get to that point.
This is from a slide that I provided in 2013. This is when we were doing, asking Carollo to start their final design work. And this is a page out of this book here, this California Multi-Agency CIP Benchmarking Study. It's the tool that I had at the time because it had a lot of information. And in here, design cost, there were a couple key ones that stuck out. Municipal projects as a whole, 12%. Other municipals as much as 14%. I just picked some out of there. 12 pump stations, 10, because there's not one in there that says wastewater treatment plant. So I did this same kind of effort, not only with this, but I went through, there's Washington Office of Financial Management has some references that you can use. There's WEF, Water Environment Federation has some references. ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers. There's multiple sources you can pull from, plus what you see the industry actually happening in the industry. And I think that what they're proposing is fair, and what they've been providing has been more than fair.
I'll wait to see how you got to those numbers. The other question I have is on that 3% escalation. Tell me, I didn't quite understand how you work that into the formula on page, I think 14, slide 14.
Yeah.
So we've got, as Joe mentioned, there's assumptions, there's hours that go along with those assumptions, there's direct labor costs associated with the classifications of folks that are going to be doing that work. And so all we did was we listed the current direct labor rate for those classifications, and then below the line, based on the projected spend rate and when those services would be performed, we escalated the DL, the direct labor rates, at 3% per year and subtotaled that. So rather than falsely elevating the direct labor rates that were used to establish the number, we just created a line item for escalation of labor, and it was around $150,000, I think, of the total. So right, because the folks that are working on the project, the younger engineers are going to get salary increases over the next 2.5-3 years, and they'll bill out at a higher rate as soon as that happens. So we just wanted to have a cushion in the budget to be able to allow that.
Has that been the experience from day one, kind of the trend?
Yeah. I mean, it's very common on longer duration contracts where it's going to be year over year, and you just have to, 3% I think is a pretty safe.
And that's factored into the 5.3
It's included.
million?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I'm not looking for a way to make your job more difficult. I'm looking for a demonstration of what we may have done as a council, or politically because of the moving around, squeezing the water balloon, to say, how much did that cost versus hardcore engineering on the plant?
Put me in a very dangerous position trying to answer that question.
It's okay to be in a dangerous position.
On the design phase, I thought stage will be somewhere between 60 and 90% design. I don't know if that case is in one of the slides. I think the fourth or fifth slide, it mentioned about design on the north side of the facility to include parking.
Yes.
If this will include parking, will that mean a design after demolition of the old Whidbey Island Bank to design the whole parking lot?
No, it was strictly to redesign the odor control units and demonstrate what the parking lots the parking area could look like. It's not actually the design of the parking lots as far as, no, it's not, is it? I don't think it is. No.
Just a small
I'm gonna have
parking
to
lot
get
right
back
on
to
the
you
north
that.
side.
We have different opinions.
Facility.
But
I know we drafted out what the layout would be in order to show that the odor control tanks would work.
Right.
And that was part of that effort, but I don't know that it includes the design effort for that parking lot and demolition of the Whidbey Island Bank building.
we'll get an answer for council meeting.
Yeah.
I guess when we brought forward Amendment 10, which was the design contract, we didn't know at that time what the future of the Whidbey Island Bank would be, and this acquisition of property that was previously owned by Wells Fargo wasn't in the mix at that time. So this bullet here considers demolition of Whidbey Island Bank, acquisition of that property, and utilization of that property for parking as well as odor control. So I guess the question is whether or not this is just a conceptual level, how we're going to use that space, or if it's actual final design documents, and we'll get an answer to that question.
Anyone else? Other questions?
All right.
So the 90% target is still August, September?
Yeah, The goal at this point is, and don't hold me to this, but end of July at a workshop sometime, a separate workshop to talk about Hoffman's 90% estimate. Keep in mind that the process buildings will be 90%, but the admin will be a slightly lesser. They're tailing behind a little bit. And then in August, coming back with a GMP to actually start that work, the process buildings. So that would be, so the first meeting in July would be estimates from Hoffman. The second one would be actual bids and a hard number from Hoffman to perform the work. So our experience in the past has been the estimate tends to be higher than the actual GMP and the bid of the work. So just be thoughtful of that when we bring it forward.
Will that not include soft costs?
Soft costs are separate animal. We can talk about those at that time if you'd like to and wrap it all up. That's what kind of where I was headed at least.
Okay, good. I would like that if you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Councilman
Another
Olmert.
question. When are we going to have the processing building 90% estimate?
They're working on review of the design right now. We're supposed to have comments back to Corolla. We're told by the end of this week, but there's, I think there might be a day or two in there. And then they're working on the estimate now.
Okay, so when are we going to get that 90%? I'm just talking about the process building, not the estimate.
Right.
Okay.
That's July.
That's July. And the processing building represents about 85%, 90% of cost of the project?
It's the lion's share of the project.
In that general range?
Yeah, I would say 80%-ish.
80, okay. It's it, okay,
In that ballpark.
that's the big chunk.
Yeah, I think at that point, with the amendments for the early work that have happened to date, the excavation, the shoring, and then the process structures, you're going to have a pretty good feeling for where this will end up at that
So
point.
as we get closer to wrapping up the 90% of the processing building estimate, the target, the preliminary estimates for the rest of the project should be a smaller bullseye. I mean, it's less technical, it's more identifiable. So those numbers should be coming in a lot closer to actual bid numbers at that time, without a lot of allowances in it.
I don't know that I would say that, but they will be definitely closer than what they have been. The estimates that we tend to get have a fair contingency in them. And the admin and maintenance building will still be, I think by that time, maybe 60%. Maybe 90 by then. September, I think, is when we're hoping for 90.
Yeah.
So we're going to be mixing apples and oranges. You're going to have a real cost for the process buildings and an estimate for the admin buildings.
Right.
So we're going to do our best to get you as close as we can and narrow in the number, but just know that there's still some things that are a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah. Don't you think, though, on the admin side of that design, the technical side of that building is pretty identifiable?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
much better, much easier than the rest
it's
of
a
it.
lot easier to get to a smaller target on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see Brian nodding his head yes at all. He's staying out of this.
I think it's much easier.
I would say yes, but my opinion matters very little relative to the GCCM who's actually doing the pricing, so that would be a good question for Hoffman and what their strategy is on pricing that. But I don't disagree with what you're saying.
You're good.
Anyone else? Other questions?
Okay. So we're on to item number 3B, KBA, amendment number 2.
I have Kay Adams here with KBA to help me out.
They left the seat pretty hot, by the way.
Sure. So right now Kay is going, thank you, Brian, for going first.
Yeah.
But in any case, this is another contract amendment that'll be on the next council meeting, May 3rd. It's amendment number 2 with KBA. If you remember, this is just kind of to bring it into concept. We all know that this is the largest facility that we're going to be working on. We only have so many city staff to manage this. KBA's forte is construction management, but really what they're doing is augmenting city staff on the project. The last contract amendment, like we talked about in the previous with Crow, was with a lot of these subs, including archaeology. We got them through the next GMP, and so KBA's contract is getting us through the deep excavation. Now that we're moving on to actual structures at this point, now we need to amend their contract. And just as we are with Krolos, we're extending KBA's through October of 2018, so it covers us through startup of the treatment plant. And one thing to keep in mind is we have asked them to provide the special inspections and materials testing as part of their contract, as opposed to contracting that separately. We went through a selection process and found that Geotest was the one to go with, and so you'll see them as a subcontractor to KBA. So the scope of services, this is, like I said before, I got a little bit wordy, but I wanted to make sure that I framed up that we're getting a lot of help from a lot of really sharp people that make this possible, and I couldn't do my job without their help. So as far as the design goes, as we complete that, they act as our representative, and they help with project planning and oversight. They're Brett's right arm down there on the site. They help us with value engineering to help reduce scope and contain the costs. On the finance side, Chris Bailey down there has been a dynamo in helping us with managing all of the documents that come through as far as pay requests. I think she scared our finance department into getting a new file cabinet. It's that much paper that gets processed, and so there's a lot of reporting that goes along with our funding and documentation that we have to keep, so that when we're audited, we can say, yes, we did that. And they do a meticulous job of keeping those for us, so it's easy to track down when we need it. They're going to assist the city with administration of the GCCM agreement and its requirements. That means, interpretation of what the contract says and making sure that everybody's on the same page. And this next bullet point is understated. I should have that bold. But the self-performed work requires an independent cost estimate paid for by the city. And so that's something that they have prepared for us for the concrete work that we awarded as GMP 7. And should we decide to do any other self-performed work, they would provide that service for us as well. They also look at the cost estimates that we get from Hoffman as another set of eyes in addition to Brett's and mine. They have an expertise, and we all take a look at them to make sure that we're not missing something or doubling up on something. And we have found one or two that we squared away, and it was worth the exercise. They're going to assist us with the resolution of change orders. They don't. The intent is to not have that many of them with a project like this, but they can happen and do happen. To assist with the monthly pay request, Dan Williams over here is our first line of defense with pay requests that come through, and I don't envy his job of having to sift through all the documents he gets, and especially looking forward to make sure that they're all in line. And if you've ever checked through invoices and pay requests, it can be a daunting task sometimes. Monitor activities to help assure project is administered in accordance with funding agency requirements. This ties to the first one. There's
the funding is a blessing and a burden at the same time. We have a lot of deliverables that we have to provide the state through the funding source that we have. And keeping track of all that and making sure that they're getting what they need and explaining it if they don't understand what they've received in what could be several banker boxes full of information. I can't imagine Brett and I doing that on our own and still being able to sleep at night. So during construction, they help us review the scope and budget that comes through from Hoffman. They assist us in identifying risks and contingencies and allocation of those risks. And what that means is there's things that come up is that the contractor that should be paying for this out of the risk contingency, or is it the city that should be paying it out of our contingency? There's a little dance that goes on there as to where that should come from, and they help us with that. They've assisted us, and this goes back to the self-performed work. Not only do they validate the cost estimate, but through that process actually help us negotiate the price. Review of the guaranteed maximum price packages. So each time we come forward with GMPs through GMP 7, they help us sift through the documents to make sure that we're getting what we paid for. And one of the challenge, the construction part's the easy part. It's going through the negotiated support services that can be the more of the challenge, and making sure we're not doubling up on how much fence we're paying for or things like that. Perform independent cost estimates for cost savings. This is, we want, for an example of that might be the odor control tanks that we're moving, having a look at that to make sure it's really a savings. Assist the city with construction phase services, participate in monitoring the GCCM conformance to schedule and contract documents. So part of the self-performed work is they've provided us a resource-loaded, or will be providing us a resource-loaded schedule that we're going to track, and we need a set of eyes to make sure they're actually performing as they promised they would. And that's, it's a way of, if you know you're being watched, it just makes everybody do what they're supposed to do. I think I'm going into a lot of detail on all this, but there's a lot that happens on the construction side. Assist the city with change management by evaluating entitlement, who's responsible and who needs to get paid for it. Assist the city in developing a punch list upon substantial completion. So they'll have an inspector on site that's looking out on the city's behalf, and reporting to Dan and saying, yep, when he's going through the pay request, hey Matt, did that really happen? And he'll be, yeah, that's all good. Or they'll go look at it closer. So special inspections are required on this project that are unique for like welding and concrete and different things. Like I said before, that's all funneled through them. There'll be daily field inspections and inspection reports, and they'll conduct or assist with the testing of an on-site on materials, testing on materials in construction. And the level of effort, this is once again, it's based on a host of assumptions on how many times we'll need inspections, and we've spent a lot of time sitting around, and a lot of it is man hours provided by KBA. And so this is a total of $2,812,000 in addition to the previously approved amount. So that the total contract with them would be $3.6 million to provide those services. And with that, if you have any questions.
So it's $800,000 for what you just presented,
No.
roughly?
It's 2 million. What I just
No, you got
presented is
the
2.8 million.
3.6
Million.
million. That's total.
We've already agreed to pay them, up to this point, 800.
Through the first 6 GMPs.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's the 800.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
through the
got it.
first,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Then what was the termination date or the scheduled termination date of the first part of your contract now that we're extending it?
Actually, we've reached it and we're just about there, but we've underrun our budget, and luckily things have gone smooth, and as a result we save money when we don't have to spend a lot of time, and it all turns into time. You're paying for time for consultants to be out there and helping with those things.
Okay, I understand that. So the first part was $800,000, and there was an estimated time frame that you were going to do certain services during that time period for $800,000. What was that ending time frame?
The intent of that was to get us through the deep excavation.
Okay, that's okay. And then this is for the next portion of
Pouring
your
concrete.
work. This goes into the real heavy activity.
Yes.
Now. Okay.
And they've asked us to include it all the way to the end of the project.
Right. No, I got that. And none of it was shown up here on the previous slides was included in your previous work before deep excavation.
Actually, it's a continuation.
It's a continuation
what
of
they've
many
been
of the same
providing.
disciplines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. And just like you said, that they watch Hoffman to make sure that they don't get too comfortable and that they don't double stuff up. And please understand that we look at this the same, or at least I do, look at it the same way. You know, we want to understand and know where this whole thing is going in as much detail as reasonable.
Other questions? Input? I have a question. You talked about daily inspections.
Yes.
So who do those go to? Do those go to Brett? Do they go to?
Well, Dan is the first screener of those, and then he produces a weekly summary. And are you on the distribution list, Rick, for that?
Yes. Yep.
So it's construction related. So it's, there was this type of machinery on site, and this is what activities occurred under these different GMPs. This is what happened last week, and this is what we're proposing for the following, with a handful of photos that, fun construction photos. A lot of times the photos that are in there end up in the weekly report that Enviro Issues helps us put out. That's the Reader's Digest version of what's been going on, but we really, between my updates at the council meeting and what Enviro Issues reports on, a lot of that's taken from the weekly reports that Dan produces.
And those would be available on site down there?
Yeah, they're yeah. And if you want to be on the distribution list, we'd be glad to add you.
I'm not asking for that yet. Not quite yet, but we'll see.
If you would like to see a sample one, I can get one
I
over
would
to your
like to see a
office.
sample, yes. And so the actual total number is that 2,812,000 plus 800 to date.
Yeah, and that'll show up in the agenda bill very clear. It's, I have it, that's why I keep looking down here. It's, the total for KBA would be $3,617,500.
So how does that number fit with that big spreadsheet that you gave me several meetings ago?
It's, the spreadsheet, the original draft spreadsheet is a little bit light in that area.
So the number you're going to show us at the next meeting is going to be higher than?
Higher than what was in that spreadsheet, the draft spreadsheet that you were looking at.
Anyone else?
So when
Yes.
or what council meeting are we planning on seeing this?
The next one, May 3rd. I just...
For both A and B, for Corollas and KBs?
That's correct.
Okay.
I want to highlight that, that there have been, I'm working with KBA and Brett to help document. There's a lot of things that happen over the course of a week and a month and a year with the project that we tend to forget about, that we've decided to add or deduct or value engineer through the project, that we could do a better job of presenting. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you add or subtracted all these items up that you would get this savings or this addition to the project, but I don't think we've done a good enough job of patting ourselves on the back for the things that we have done to save money. Like on the concrete work, there were millions of dollars shaved off of that project. We did some value engineering on the concrete package again, and we're able to find another $150,000 with moving the odor control to the north side of the wall. You won't know it's there. It'll be just another feature that looks like it's landscaping, but that avoided having to do stone columns, additional stone columns inside the yard. It's hard to quantify all that, and we forget that since we're in the trenches to mention it and you draw attention to it, but it's stuff that we're looking for every day that we're working on the job. So when we see some stuff like these might be higher than what we had presented that you had seen, there's a lot of other things that are drawing the cost down as well.
Yeah, and I believe that to be true, don't get me wrong. I think that it'll be easier for me to understand council and the public as we get further along in the project. I'm anxious to get to the 90% stage. One last question that I have is that now, you know, we were talking early on in the project about December 2017 being the final completion date. And that was something we're working with DOE on. Now we're talking October of 2018. I've heard that date a couple times now today. Is that the final date as we know it now?
That's what we've drawn the line in the sand with Hoffman as our target. You know, there's been a lot of things that have caused the schedule to creep a little bit, but we've been working with Ecology. They have a copy of the most recent schedule. I think it was uploaded just last week. So Sean McCone over there is who's our watchdog right now with the Ecology, is aware of where we're at.
Okay, good. I think that was my biggest concern, is that we're on the same page.
Yes.
With
They're right in there with us.
Okay. Well, a couple of good reports here. Appreciate that. Any other questions? And seeing no emerging issues, I think we're done for today. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Kate.